Hi everybody, this is Jamie from the Unlikely Homeschool. Last week on my blog, I shared my top 6 reasons why I think every homeschool family should make time for timelines. And since sharing those thoughts, I've received numerous messages from readers asking if I could share some simple how-to tips of how a family can make a timeline and put it together, especially when they have limited space and maybe don't have a wall to make an expansive wall timeline. Now, if you're a regular reader of my blog, you know that I too have a very small home, and we don't have a room in our house specifically designated for homeschooling. We kind of spread out all throughout the house. And so we have purposed not to let all of the rooms in our home look like a classroom. So we don't really put a whole lot of school things on our wall, including a timeline. So today I'd like to just share with you a few thoughts of how we put together a timeline in our small house without spreading it over the whole space of a wall. A few years ago, I ordered this book. It's the Sunlight Curriculum's Book of Time. I actually purchased mine used on homeschoolclassifieds.com, but you can go to the Sunlight website and order that. We don't order anything else from Sunlight. Currently this year we use none of their products except for this one. But I think this book could successfully be used with any curriculum that you're using for history or other things. So anyway, I got this in the mail, and when it comes to you, it basically just has big blank open pages. Originally, Sunlight just had the white space with one black line running all the way through the middle of the page, and also some 100-year span dates up in the corners here, and that's how the book came to us. But I decided that I wanted to add a few more lines on the timeline, just because I knew that, especially when you get into some of the really crowded eras of history, like the 1800s, when a lot was happening at that time, that this one line might not fit everything that we wanted to add to our timeline. So as soon as I got the book, I added a red line at the top, a green line in the middle, and a blue line at the bottom. Now the colors don't really mean anything. They could have been, all black lines, or they could have been any amount of colors. Those are just the colors that I chose. Then in the front of the book, I made myself a little key so I didn't forget what those colored lines represent. So the black line essentially for us represents just general history, things that are happening generally in that era. The red line I've designated for Bible and church history. I don't know if you can see that. The green line is for the arts and literature, where we write down any great writers and their works. And the blue line would be for science and technology. And in doing that, in spreading the space out, you can see as we're now in Grecian history, we get into some tight spaces here in our history timeline. And so having those extra lines and sort of designating them for different parts of history, it really helps to be able to put it all on one page. In my post about the top 6 reasons for making time for timelines, I share that one of the reasons that every family should make a timeline is that a timeline helps for cross-curricular learning. We're very eclectic homeschoolers, so I don't use one curriculum for every subject, and because of that, sometimes we run into issues where we learn in language arts about a fantastic piece of literature written by someone maybe in the 1700s. Well, we're in Grecian history right now, but we can take out our timeline during language arts, find the 1700s in our timeline, and add that piece of literature to our timeline. Even though we didn't learn it in history time, it's still something worth remembering. And so a timeline such as this, or one that you put on your wall, is a great way to pull together information across your curriculum. The other thing I wanted to share with you about our timeline is there are numerous resources out there for prefabricated timeline figures, and I'll hopefully share a few links to the ones that I think are the best with this blog post that will air with this video. But my family and I choose not to buy those prefabbed timeline figures. My kids instead like to make their own figures, and I just give them a piece of blank white paper. I kind of encourage them to make their little home drawn figure about 2 inches, no bigger than that, just for space reasons. And then they draw a little figure that they think that would represent that particular point of history well. One of the reasons that we don't do prefabbed timeline figures is just because my kids like to draw their own. But I like it when they draw their own too, because I think it's the difference between filling out a worksheet and actually notebooking information. They're taking their own thought and what they learned about that part of history and basically retelling it in their own words, in essence, in their own pictures for a timeline. But they're putting all their own thoughts and what they remember about that point in history in drawing out their own picture. And I find more value in that than just coloring a timeline figure. There's nothing wrong with coloring a timeline figure. We just choose to make our own and make it a little bit more personalized. So once they draw their little figure on their little 2x2 square piece of paper, they color it and they cut it out and glue it on with a glue stick. I like for them to draw the figures on a separate sheet of paper. That way, in case they make a mistake, they can always start again and the whole timeline book isn't sort of ruined. We glue it kind of in the spot where the figure should be placed, and then we just jot a little note about what that picture represents. Maybe it's the person's name, the actual date that something happened, and maybe what happened on that day. And that's a great way to just open the timeline book and see across the curriculum things that we learned about in Bible time, that we also learned about in history, that maybe we learned about in science. It's all here together in the right era. One of the things that I'll be doing next year with my kids as we start Tapestry of Grace curriculum, I purchased a blank timeline book from Miller Pad and Paper, which is a paper company that sells to homeschoolers. And it doesn't even have dates. It's just a big book of blank timelines. And my kids and I will be notebooking through our Tapestry of Grace, and I want them to be able to have some personalized, individualized timelines within their notebook. So I purchased this timeline book so that they can tear the pages out, maybe cut off the perforation, punch it with a 3-hole punch and stick it inside their Tapestry of Grace notebook. Now I recognize that there's lots of freebies out there online that you can print out, freebie timelines, printable timelines. I liked this one because it was on a little bit heavier cardstock paper. Plus it makes it really handy to just have them all printed out and just tear them out as we need them. So we'll be adding those to our history notebooks next year, as well as doing the Sunlight timeline book together. We've been working on this particular timeline now since my daughter was in kindergarten. She's now in 5th grade, so at least for the last 6 years we've been putting this together, and it's just been so wonderful to go back and look through the different eras of history that we've learned together and review some of those timeline figures. I hope that helps you as you prepare to create a timeline together with your kids. Happy homeschooling.